Well, hello. This is going to be a pretty quick episode. We wanted to point out something to you that we don't think anybody's going to take the time to do. So, recently, there was a Yale Law School professor who said it's okay to talk about secession and you shouldn't punish people who speak about secession. It's actually quite fine. Let me show you a little bit. So, Stephen Carter is a graduate of Stanford University here in California and Yale Law School. He also clerked for Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court. So the man knows a fair amount of law. He recently wrote an article where he said this: secession movements are nothing new, and punishing their advocates is a dreadful idea. Their causes are complex and almost always point to problems that should be taken seriously. Punishing secession advocates is a dreadful idea, and their causes almost always point to something that should be taken seriously. That's from Professor Stephen Carter of Stanford University in Yale and clerked for this Thurgood Marshall. He also said a new paper argues from a study of thousands of secession movements around the world that a group's sense of shared cultural identity is a more important predictor than economics. A group's sense of shared cultural identity is a more important predictor than economics. How many times have we been saying California is culturally nothing like America? I mean, the book that was the first book to promote California independence, California's Next Century 2.0, started off as a book only to explain how California culture was very different from American culture. So the book, California's Next Century, that started all of this, Calexit, was just to point out Californians are not like Americans. And then it turned into a book for secession, or independence, I should say. And now we have this Yale professor saying, there's a new study on secession, and it says a group's sense of shared cultural identity is more important than just economics in determining if there'll be secession. California's independent. Secondly, we've been talking about independence, and we should not be punished. Also, if you look at the screenshot for this article, and I'll show you the article, he specifically mentions California. Like, don't punish secession advocates in California. It's not right. Finally, he says, whatever the answer, the new research suggests that if we're as hopelessly polarized as pundits seem to think, we're in for a lot more secession talk in the years to come. If we're as hopelessly polarized as pundits seem to think, we're in for a lot more secession talk in the years to come. Let me show you the article. Here's the article. Bloomberg, America's new secession movements aren't a crime in New Hampshire and California. Stephen Carter specifically mentioning California. Secession movements aren't a crime, although we're getting fierce blowback. He wrote this very recently. Secession movements are nothing new, and punishing their advocates is a dreadful idea. Their causes and almost always point to problems that should be taken seriously, like California has laws to protect ourselves from gun violence that are struck down by the federal government, and that our culture is very different from America, and that we're held up by trade deals. He talks about a bunch of different independence movements. There's a lot of African-American secession movements I didn't know about. Really good piece on that. Bits and pieces of California have been arguing for secession for years. As a matter of fact, Trump's 2016 victory led to cries across the deep blue states like California. Should we punish the advocates who push for secession? No. We shouldn't punish secession talk. So specifically says California pushed for secession and in 2016, and should we punish them? No, we shouldn't punish secession talk. That's what he says. Shared cultural identity is more important predictor than economics. We're in for a lot more secession talk in the years to come. And that is from this author, Stephen Carter, Yale University, and clerk to Thurgood Marshall. Here is his Yale University page, the William Nelson Cromwell Professor of Law. And here's a little bit about Stephen Carter on Wikipedia. And yes, he's African-American. At least I believe so. So I just wanted to take the time to point out something the mainstream media won't. You have a Yale professor who worked for the Supreme Court saying, don't punish secession advocates. And if Californians want to talk about secession, that's legal and it's okay, and you should not punish them. And he also says things are as bad as it looks. Expect a lot more secession talk. So I figured we'd never see that in the media where we could hear about a Yale law school professor say, you know what, ease up on the California secession advocates and don't act like they're bad guys. They're doing nothing wrong at all. I've never heard that before. So I want to make sure you heard it. He's talking about us here in California, and he's a reputable person. Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.